Trump's biggest miscalculation just changed. North America forever. Mark Carney walked into the White House this morning. He sat across from Donald Trump. He listened to the ultimatum. And then he did something no world leader has done in Trump's presidency. He got up, picked up his briefcase, and left. No signature, no counteroffer, no apology, just silence, and a plane back to Ottawa. What happened in that room in the next 20 minutes is going to change the price of everything in your life. And almost nobody is telling you the full story. If you want to follow this story as it develops, because the next 48 hours are going to be unlike anything we've seen in North American trade history, make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell. I'm covering every update in real time. Here is what most headlines are missing. This wasn't a surprise. This was a trap. And Canada walked out of it. For 6 years, the USMCA, the trade deal governing $700 billion in annual commerce between the U.S. and Canada, has been quietly ticking toward its mandatory review deadline. Every economist assumed the renewal would be routine, a formality, a handshake. Trump saw the same deadline and saw something completely different. He saw leverage, and he decided to use it. According to documents leaked directly from inside the negotiation team, Trump entered the final meeting with a demand that had nothing to do with trade balance or border policy. He wanted a unilateral cancellation clause, the legal ability for the United States to exit the deal on 12 months' notice every single year, forever. Think about what that actually means. It means Canada would wake up every January not knowing whether its economy still had a foundation. It means every factory, every farmer, every energy company in Canada would be operating under permanent uncertainty. It wasn't a trade negotiation. It was an application for a leash. Carney read the document. He conferred with his delegation, and Canada formally withdrew from the review process. 3 words: enormous consequences. Because here is what Trump miscalculated, and this is the part that should make every American watching this deeply uncomfortable. He forgot to check the map. Canada supplies more than 60% of U.S. crude oil imports. A single car part crosses the U.S.-Canada border an average of 7 times before the finished vehicle rolls off the assembly line. The aluminum in your iPhone, the lumber in your walls, the fertilizer growing your food, overwhelmingly Canadian. Trump thought he was holding a gun to Canada's head. He was actually holding it to his own supply chain. Within hours of Carney's withdrawal, the evidence of that miscalculation was already visible. At the Ambassador Bridge, the single busiest trade crossing in North America, connecting Detroit to Windsor, U.S. Customs reportedly issued orders to flag and inspect every incoming Canadian cargo. It's a pressure tactic, a squeeze play. The message from Washington: come back to the table or we slow your economy to a crawl. But look at what happened on the Canadian side of that bridge. The trucks didn't pile up in panic. They rerouted. Within hours, rail freight in Vancouver and Montreal was being redirected toward European and Asian destinations. Carney didn't just walk out of the White House, he walked out of a door he had already built an alternative to. This is the detail that changes everything. For the past 2 years, quietly, without press conferences, without Twitter wars, Mark Carney has been constructing what analysts are calling a strategic decoupling framework. He signed a critical minerals security pact with the European Union. He locked in long-term energy contracts with Japan and South Korea. He positioned Canada not as a U.S.-dependent neighbor, but as an independent global resource superpower. Canada holds the world's largest reserves of fresh water. It is a top 3 supplier of uranium, potash, and rare earth metals, the building blocks of every battery, every defense system, every clean energy grid on the planet. The world is not short of countries that want those resources. Carney knew that. He just waited for the right moment to say it out loud, and here is where it gets genuinely dangerous for the American economy. Check the financial markets from this morning. When trade tensions spike, the textbook response is simple. The Canadian dollar falls as investors flee to the safety of the U.S. dollar. That is Economics 101. It did not happen today. The Canadian dollar ticked upward. Global investors looked at Carney's move and did not see a country in retreat. They saw a country with a plan. They saw a resource-rich, politically stable nation opening its doors to the rest of the world at the exact moment the United States is slamming them shut. When Wall Street trusts Ottawa more than Washington, something fundamental has shifted. And it shifted today. Meanwhile, inside the White House, the phone lines are lit up. Not with foreign dignitaries, but with American executives. Auto industry CEOs from Detroit. Agricultural exporters from the Midwest. Energy company executives from the Gulf Coast. Every one of them delivering the same message. This cannot last a week, because if it does, they start laying off workers. Not Canadian workers. American workers. Industry estimates suggest a full border disruption lasting 7 days could trigger more than 50,000 immediate U.S. manufacturing job losses. Trump set this in motion to protect American workers. He may have just endangered more of them than any policy in his presidency. And Trump knows it. You can read it in the timeline of his own statements. In the morning, the framing was confident. Canada would come back, the deal would get done, America wins. By mid-afternoon, the tone had shifted. His post read, "Canada is treating us very badly, very unfair. We will charge them big tariffs." Read that again. That is not the language of a negotiator who thinks he is winning. That is the language of a man who expected surrender and got strategy instead. The contrast between these two leaders could not be sharper. And it matters because leadership style is now economic policy. Trump is operating from a 1980s mercantilist playbook. He believes economic size equals negotiating dominance. He believes pain flows in one direction, from the powerful to the less powerful. He treats trade relationships the way he treated real estate deals. Extract maximum concession, declare victory, move on. That model collapsed today because it assumes the other side has no options. Canada has options. Canada exercised them. Carney is operating from a completely different framework. He spent years as governor of the Bank of England. He sat at the table during the 2008 financial crisis. He understands that in a globally integrated economy, leverage is not about size. It is about irreplaceability. And Canada, it turns out, is very hard to replace. He did not respond to Trump's ultimatum with outrage or with a press conference or with a pointed tweet. He responded with a withdrawal notice and a flight home. Because he understood something Trump did not. The loudest move in a negotiation is sometimes the quietest one. As Carney's motorcade left the White House grounds, a reporter called out to him, "Prime Minister, are you worried about the president's response?" Carney paused. He turned, and he said with no visible emotion, "You cannot tariff geography. We are not going anywhere, but we are not taking instructions either." Then he got in the car. That sentence is going to be quoted in economics textbooks, because in 14 words he articulated the entire strategic position of a country that just redrew its own map. So where does this go? Realistically, there are 3 paths forward, and only one of them ends without serious pain. Path 1. The retreat. Markets open tomorrow, and the reaction is severe enough that Trump quietly signals a willingness to restart talks on neutral terms. Both sides save face. The USMCA gets a 90-day extension. This is the best-case scenario. It requires Trump to back down without calling it backing down, which is historically the hardest thing for him to do. Path 2. The targeted war. Trump announces the 25% universal tariff on Monday as threatened. Carney retaliates, but not broadly. He targets surgically. Bourbon from Kentucky, Harley-Davidsons from Wisconsin, orange juice from Florida. Every product chosen for maximum political pain in maximum electoral importance. The border slows, factories idle, the stock market drops. This phase lasts until one side's voters scream louder than the others. Carney is betting Canadian voters have longer stamina than Trump's base when gas prices rise because Canadian crude gets taxed. Path 3. The break. Trump invokes national security powers. Canada responds by restricting or redirecting energy exports entirely. The USMCA formally dissolves. North America splits into 2 rival economic zones, one integrated with the emerging Global South and the European industrial base, the other increasingly isolated and internally focused. We are closer to this scenario than any analyst was predicting 6 months ago, and it becomes more likely with every tweet. Here is the hardest truth in all of this. What is happening between Washington and Ottawa is not just a trade dispute, it is a signal to every U.S. ally on the planet. If the United States will weaponize economic dependency against the country that shares its longest border, its most integrated supply chain, and 70 years of unbroken alliance, then no alliance is safe. Not with the UK, not with Japan, not with South Korea, not with Germany. Trump believes he is projecting strength. What the world is reading is something far more dangerous: unpredictability. And in geopolitics, unpredictability in a superpower does not create fear. It creates distance. Carney is not just protecting Canada's trade position. He is building a post-American architecture for the Canadian economy, one that can survive and potentially thrive in a world where Washington can no longer be counted on as a reliable partner. That is an extraordinary sentence to write about the United States of America in 2025. But here we are. The next 48 hours will determine whether this is a crisis that gets managed or a rupture that becomes permanent. Watch the markets at open. Watch whether Trump calls Carney or posts about him. Watch the Ambassador Bridge traffic numbers. These are the real indicators, not the press releases, not the spin, the math. Because in the end, this is what Carney understood and Trump did not. Economies are not won by the loudest voice at the table. They are won by the person who still has somewhere else to go when they leave it. Now, I want to hear from you. Is Mark Carney making the smartest geopolitical move of the decade? Or is he gambling with millions of livelihoods on both sides of the border? And is Trump finally facing consequences he can't tweet his way out of? Or does he have a card left to play that nobody is seeing? Drop your take in the comments. I read every single one, and the debate down there right now is worth joining. If this breakdown gave you something the mainstream headlines didn't, subscribe. Not as a favor to me, but because this story is not over. The next update is going to hit harder than this one. You do not want to be catching up on it after the fact. History doesn't wait. Neither should you.